All right, today we're diving deep into something, well, it's a tough topic, but an important one, depression. And we're going beyond just, symptoms and statistics. We're going to get a really personal take on this, thanks to a sermon by Apostle Keith Jenkins from Kingdom Teachers International Ministries.
Yeah, and what's really striking is that this sermon, it wasn't planned. Apostle Jenkins, he just felt he had to address this
Yeah.
right there and then. I mean, after learning about multiple suicides that same day.
Wow. That's heavy. I mean, just thinking about the impact of that. And you can hear that emotion in the audio. It's like this incredible back and forth between Apostle Jenkins, his co-hosts, Reverend Rose, and Pastor Lamont, and the whole congregation.
Right, it's palpable, really.
So, given all that, what was his main point about depression?
He starts off by calling it, he calls it a time thief.
Right.
It steals your joy, it steals your purpose. And he connects this to that feeling of being lost,
Hmm.
like you don't know who you are or what you're meant to be doing in life.
I can see how feeling lost could lead to hopelessness.
He's not afraid to get real about that. He uses the phrase walking dead to describe people living without purpose.
Whoa, okay, that's intense. But it definitely makes you pay attention.
Right. He's trying to shake people up, make them see how serious it is to just drift through life without direction.
So how does he connect that lack of purpose
Yeah.
to the everyday struggles people face?
He uses this analogy. He compares getting a tough letter, like with bad news, impacts your job maybe, to that feeling you got as a kid getting a bad report card.
Okay, yeah, I see where he's going. As adults, those letters, they come in the form of setbacks or disappointments, maybe just a confusing bill, right? And it hits us just as hard as that kid with the report card.
Exactly. He's saying that anxiety, that pit in your stomach, that urge to just avoid it all, it comes from that same place, feeling inadequate, like we've failed.
So instead of just dismissing it as adulting, he wants us to see it as a sign. Maybe we're disconnected from our purpose, our sense of self-worth.
That's a great way to put it. And that's where his spiritual perspective comes in. He believes this lost feeling, this vulnerability to anxiety and despair, it's tied to what he calls a spirit of fear.
Okay. For people who aren't familiar with that term, how would you explain spirit of fear?
Think of it as just overwhelming anxiety or
Oh.
being paralyzed by fear. That voice inside that tells you you're not good enough, that you can't handle things, that everything's going to fall apart.
And he contrasts this with something else,
It
right?
is with the spirit of power and love and of a sound mind that he believes God provides. It's like this inner strength, this resilience. It comes from connecting to something bigger than ourselves.
Okay, so he's established depression as this time thief, linked to fear and a lack of purpose. And he's offered this idea of finding strength, purpose through faith. But he goes into some pretty sensitive areas, right?
Statements about suicide?
Yeah, exactly. He suggests that suicide, even among believers, might not always be God's will. And he brings up what Apostle Paul said about being born out of due season.
Right. That's a very complex topic and bound to cause debate. But it highlights the struggle many face, trying to reconcile their faith with, these very real mental health challenges.
So he's given this difficult picture of depression's impact, but he doesn't leave people without hope, does he?
No, not at all. He offers a lot of hope, a lot of practical advice on how to fight back. It's multifaceted. And one of the key things he stresses is numbering your days and seeking wisdom.
That's from Psalms, right? What does numbering your days really mean in practice?
It's about recognizing how precious time is, making the most of each day. Not in a morbid way, but in a way that pushes you to be present, to focus on what truly matters, to live intentionally.
So instead of getting caught up in worry about the past or the future, being more mindful of the present, appreciating what each day brings.
Exactly. And along with that mindfulness, he stresses seeking wisdom, learning, growing, so you can face life's challenges with more understanding.
So it's not all about self-reliance. He also talks about the role of faith and prayer.
Absolutely. He emphasizes seeking God's mercy every day. He even quotes that verse, "This is the day the Lord has made, and I will rejoice and be glad in it." It's a reminder to approach each day with gratitude, expecting good things, even when things are tough.
It's about shifting your perspective, focusing on the positive, even when it's hard.
Right. And he makes it clear this doesn't mean ignoring or minimizing people's pain. He specifically acknowledges the role of professional help, mentions counseling, medication as important tools in this fight.
That's key. He's recognizing that overcoming depression often needs a combination of faith, personal growth, and that professional support. It's okay to seek help from experts.
And he goes further. He shares this really powerful line. I was born for this, but I'm not dying like that. It's a declaration, a refusal to let depression define him, steal his purpose.
I love that. It's so empowering. It really speaks to the power of mindset, choosing to fight for your well-being,
Yeah.
not giving in to despair.
Right. And he doesn't just preach this from afar. He, along with Reverend Rose and Pastor Lamont, they really emphasize the importance of community in this
Yeah.
battle.
So it's not just about individual effort. It's about having a support system.
Exactly. They talk about believers being there for one another, truly listening, and not shying away from those tough questions.
And those tough questions can be really uncomfortable, can't they?
They can. But Pastor Lamont makes this point. He says, most people who unalive themselves didn't want to unalive themselves. They just wanted the pain to go away.
That's powerful. It reminds us there's always more to the story. Behind every suicide, there's a person hurting, struggling. Maybe they didn't feel like they had anywhere to turn.
And that's why he urges listeners to call the suicide hotline, 988, and encourage others to do the same. He wants people to know there are resources. There's no shame in getting help.
That's a really important message.
It is. And what's refreshing is that all three, Apostle Jenkins, Reverend Rose, and Pastor Lamont, they all say depression is curable. They offer real hope, backed by real advice and a deep belief in the power of faith and community.
Okay, so we've covered a lot. Depression as a time thief, the importance of purpose, fighting fear, the role of faith and professional help, the power of community. What else did Apostle Jenkins share in this sermon?
Well, one thing he gets into is how fear shows up in our lives.
Yeah.
It's not just feeling scared. It's those subtle ways anxiety creeps in and takes our peace.
Let's unpack that a bit. What does he say about these different faces of fear?
He talks about fright, obviously, but also torment, anxiety, and even physical symptoms from stress and fear, like heart attacks.
So he's showing how fear impacts us on many levels, emotionally, mentally, even physically.
Exactly. He's emphasizing this isn't just a bad day or feeling down. This is deep-rooted. It can affect every part of your life.
But he's not saying everyone with anxiety or stress has this spirit of fear, is he?
No, he's clear that these are complex issues. You need wisdom, discernment, especially if you're helping others. He reminds everyone just having these symptoms doesn't automatically mean you're under attack.
Which makes sense, since he's talking to people who see themselves as, spiritual leaders, teachers.
Exactly. He's equipping them to recognize the nuances and approach things with sensitivity and wisdom.
So if he's not saying jump to spiritual warfare every time someone's anxious, how does he suggest combating this spirit of fear?
He turns to a powerful scripture, 2 Timothy 1:7. It says, God gives us a spirit of power and love and of a sound mind.
So it's about tapping into those qualities, power, love, a sound mind, to overcome fear and find healing.
Right. He believes God has already given us everything we need to resist depression and find wholeness. But it's up to us to activate those gifts.
Again, he doesn't dismiss professional help.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
He emphasizes there's no shame in seeking help from experts for your mind, body, or spirit. He actually sees these different supports as working together for well-being.
I appreciate that. He's presenting this holistic approach. It's not either. It's about using all the resources we have.
And you hear that same holistic approach when he talks about praise, the power of praise.
He's not just talking about singing hymns in church, is he?
No, he's talking about having a spirit of gratitude, joy, even when things are hard. He believes you can't genuinely praise God and be consumed by depression at the same time.
So it's about making that choice to focus on the positive, to shift your mindset from despair to hope.
Exactly. And he brings it back to numbering our days, reminding people that each day is precious, not to be wasted on negativity.
What stood out to you about Reverend Rose and Pastor Lamont's contributions?
They bring some really valuable perspectives from their own experiences. Reverend Rose, she talks about really listening to people who are struggling, not just trying to fix them.
That sounds like a call for deeper empathy and understanding in the community.
It is. She's reminding us that sometimes the best thing we can do is just be there with someone who's hurting. Offer a listening ear. No judgment.
And Pastor Lamont, what did he bring to the conversation?
He shared insightful things from his work with J. Holman House. That nonprofit focused on mental health. He brings in real-world experience, talking about warning signs and not ignoring red flags.
It's great he brings that practical knowledge. What specific advice did he offer?
He talked about asking loved ones directly if they're thinking about suicide, even though it's a really hard conversation. He stressed that most people who attempt suicide, they don't actually want to die. They just want the pain to stop.
That's heartbreaking, but so important to remember.
It is. And it highlights the need to be proactive. He even compared it to, like, the legal duty teachers have to report abuse. We have moral obligation to act when someone's in danger.
That's a powerful way to put it. He's challenging us to step up and be advocates for those struggling.
Right. And something I appreciate about the whole sermon is how all three emphasize that depression is curable. They offer hope, not just platitudes.
And they back that up with real advice and resources. It's not about pretending the pain isn't there. It's acknowledging it and then offering a way forward.
There's a point near the end where they're discussing why people avoid those tough conversations about mental health. Apostle Jenkins says, we don't ask the hard questions because we can't deal with the hard answers.
He's calling out that tendency, especially in faith communities, to avoid uncomfortable things.
Right. And Pastor Lamont adds, don't let these church people fool you.
Right.
Just go pray about it. No, you can go pray, but at the same time, call 988. And that includes leadership, too.
He's directly challenging the idea that prayer alone is enough. He's advocating for a more holistic approach, including professional help and community support.
And it's really brave of him to say that, especially in that setting. He's acknowledging that even spiritual leaders can struggle and need help.
That's a powerful message. It speaks to the importance of breaking down stigma, creating a culture where people feel safe to ask for help.
He's urging his listeners to reject shame.
Yeah.
And embrace a more proactive, compassionate approach to supporting those who are struggling.
It's a beautiful message, and it comes across so clearly that he's speaking from a place of deep compassion and understanding.
Absolutely. And I think what's really inspiring is how he links overcoming depression to a deeper understanding of your spiritual identity and purpose.
So it's not just about feeling better, it's about connecting to a higher purpose.
Yeah. He believes that recognizing and embracing your God-given purpose is key to pushing back against that spirit of fear.
That's a powerful thought, finding that inner strength that comes from knowing who you are while you're here.
And he doesn't stop there. He explains how that sense of purpose helps you face challenges, stand up to those bullies, those forces that try to steal your joy.
So it's about finding that resilience and fighting back against the darkness.
Exactly. And he ends the sermon with this incredibly powerful statement, not on my watch.
Wow, that's a declaration of war against depression and suicide. He's taking a stand and urging his listeners to do the same.
He is. And I think it's a call to action for all of us, regardless of our faith. It's about recognizing how serious this is and being part of the solution.
So we've talked about the personal impact of depression, the power of faith, community, professional help. But before we move on, I want to bring this back to you, the listener. What resonates with you? Have you ever felt depression stealing your time, your joy?
It's important to acknowledge that, many of us have either been there ourselves or know someone who has. And while Apostle Jenkins speaks from a faith perspective, there's wisdom here that goes beyond any specific belief system.
Absolutely. This idea of finding our purpose, facing our fears, finding strength in community that's universal, it can help anyone, regardless of their background.
And even if you're not struggling with depression right now, it's good to be aware of the signs and be ready to support those around you who might be having a hard time.
I couldn't agree more. So as we head into part 2 of our deep dive, we're going to look at some specific strategies Apostle Jenkins recommends for overcoming depression, reclaiming your joy and purpose.
We'll also hear more from Reverend Rose and Pastor Lamont. They offer some really insightful and practical advice based on their own experiences.
So stay tuned for part 2, where we'll continue exploring this powerful sermon and unpack even more valuable takeaways.
Going back to Apostle Jenkins' sermon, what stuck with me was how he talked about praising God, even when you're dealing with depression.
Yeah, that was interesting. He doesn't mean like just singing hymns, going through the motions.
No, not at all. He's talking about a real spirit of gratitude and joy, even when you feel down. He believes you can't truly be praising God and be consumed by depression at the same time.
So it's about choosing to shift your focus, finding things to be grateful for, even when life feels overwhelming.
Exactly. And he's honest, it's not easy. It takes work, especially when you're struggling. But he believes choosing to focus on the positive, it really can change your mental and emotional state.
I can see how that could be powerful, like retraining your brain to see the good instead of getting stuck in the negative.
And he connects it back to numbering our days, reminding everyone that each day is precious. Don't waste it on negativity.
It's about making the most of the time we have, not letting depression steal those moments.
Right. And he says, God's mercy, it's new every morning, a fresh start, a chance to start each day with hope, with gratitude.
That's a good reminder. Like, hitting the reset button and choosing to see the possibilities instead of dwelling on what went wrong.
And I think that's something everyone can benefit from, whether you're religious or not. It's about finding that strength to choose joy, gratitude, even when it's hard.
Earlier, we talked about community and how important it is for those struggling with depression. What did Reverend Rose and Pastor Lamont have to say about that?
Reverend Rose, she really focused on listening without judgment. She talked about how people who are hurting, they often just need someone to hear them, to validate their feelings, to have a safe place to share.
That makes sense. Sometimes we try to offer solutions or advice when what they really need is someone to just be there.
Exactly. Just be present with them and listen without judgment.
What about Pastor Lamont? What were some of his key takeaways?
He shared a lot of practical wisdom from his work at J. Holman House. He talked about recognizing the warning signs of suicide and not being afraid to ask tough questions.
That's got to be a difficult conversation. But it sounds like he thinks it's crucial.
He does. He said most people who try to take their own lives, they don't really want to die. They just want the pain to stop.
Wow. That's a reminder that we need to be proactive. We can't just wait for someone to ask for help. Sometimes we have to start those hard conversations.
He even compared it to like teachers having to report signs of abuse. It's our moral duty to do something when we see someone in danger.
That's a powerful analogy. It's a call to be advocates for those who are struggling.
Right. And he gave some specific advice for having those tough conversations. He said, don't let these church people fool you. Just go pray about it. No. You can go pray, but at the same time, call 988. And that includes leadership, too.
So he's challenging the idea that prayer is enough. He's pushing for a broader approach. Professional help, community support.
Exactly. And it's pretty brave of him to say that, especially in a church. He's admitting that even spiritual leaders can struggle and need help.
That's a huge message. It's about breaking down stigma, right? Making it okay to ask for help.
Yeah. He wants people to leave shame behind and be proactive, be compassionate when supporting those who are struggling.
And one thing that stood out to me throughout the whole sermon was that genuine hope from all three speakers. They kept saying, depression is curable.
Right. They back that up with real advice, resources, and a deep belief in the power of faith and community.
It's not about pretending the pain doesn't exist. It's about acknowledging it and then finding a way forward.
A path that combines faith, action, and support.
A holistic approach that gets how complex depression is, but still offers real hope for those who are going through it.
Absolutely. And I think one of the most inspiring things is how they tie overcoming depression to understanding your spiritual identity and purpose.
Right. So it's not just about feeling better. It's about something deeper.
Right. They believe knowing and accepting your God-given purpose is key to fighting back against that spirit of fear.
That's powerful. Finding strength and knowing who you are and why you're here.
And they don't stop there. They explain how this sense of purpose gives you the power to face your challenges, to stand up to those bullies, those things that try to steal your joy.
So it's about building resilience and fighting back against the darkness.
Exactly. And Apostle Jenkins, he ends the sermon with this powerful line. He says, "Not on my watch."
Wow. That's a powerful statement. It's like he's declaring war on depression, on suicide, and he's calling on everyone to join him.
He is. And I think regardless of your beliefs, we can all learn from that. Recognize how serious this is and be part of the solution.
It's about choosing hope, not despair, action, not apathy, connection, not isolation.
And remembering that no one has to go through this alone. There's help out there, people who care, and always hope for healing and recovery.
So to wrap up part 2 of our deep dive, I want to leave you with this. What does it mean for you to number your days and live with purpose, even when things are tough?
Something to think about, isn't it? And as you do, remember that you have the power to choose joy, to be grateful, and to embrace the good in each moment.
Don't let depression take your time, your joy. You are stronger than you think, and there's a brighter future out there.
And remember, if you or someone you know is struggling, there's help. Reach out, connect, and don't lose hope.
Stay tuned for part 3. We'll continue to explore Apostle Jenkins' message and talk about how to apply these powerful insights to our own lives. You know, through this whole sermon, one thing that stuck with me is how depression can affect anyone, you know?
Yeah, he really drove that home, didn't he? He said, no one is immune from a bully. It's like depression, it doesn't care who you are, your faith, your status. It just tries to knock you down.
It's a good reminder. We all have those vulnerabilities, and we need to remember that for ourselves and when we're supporting others.
And I think that goes back to what he said about community. It's not about fighting alone. It's about coming together to stand up to those bullers, the things that try to take away our joy and purpose.
Like a call to action almost. We need to be there for each other, to support each other, to create like a safety net.
Exactly. And he ends the sermon with this really strong statement that sums it all up.
Not on my watch. It's like he's saying depression won't win. Not in my community, not while I'm here.
And he doesn't just say it, he puts it into action, you know, talking about professional help, the suicide hotline, being there for each other.
So it's not just words, it's about actually doing something.
Right. And that's something we can all take away from this, no matter what we believe. Depression is serious. We need to do something about it.
We can't just talk about it. We have to actually create a culture of support, empathy, action.
And Apostle Jenkins, he gives us a really powerful plan for how to do that. He brings together faith, practical advice, and compassion.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are some things you hope people will take away from this?
I think the biggest thing is depression is complex. It needs a multi-pronged approach. It's not just a spiritual problem or a mental health problem. It affects us all, and we have to care.
He's calling for a combination of faith, action, professional support, reminding us to look out for each other, listen to each other, and offer help without judgment.
And he challenges us to look at our own lives. What does it mean to number our days, to live with purpose, even when it's hard?
That's a question for all of us, whether we're dealing with depression or not. Chances are we all know someone who is.
And remember, depression can be treated. There is always hope, and there are people who care, who want to help.
This deep dive has given you a glimpse into Apostle Jenkins' perspective, but we hope you'll explore these ideas further. Think about how they apply to you, your community.
Remember, you're not alone. We could fight depression together and create a world where everyone feels supported and understood.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We hope you found it informative and inspiring.